This is take 6? I don't really know at this point, but I'm going for it. Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I'm doing something a little different. On this channel, I usually talk about books, and while there will be book recommendations at the end of this video, I really wanted to take a little bit of time to talk some about my experience of queerness. I've said on my Instagram that I've been trying to work on a video where I talk about my sexuality and gender, especially my experience coming out and then coming out again later and not really figuring my shit out to a pretty large degree until my late 20s. So I'm here to talk about it. I have attempted planning out this video in ways that make sense, but I just end up writing a shit ton and not really getting anything cohesive enough that's short enough that I can use in a video. So I'm just winging it, which is why it's taken me so many tries to do this, because I ramble. I'm bad about rambling. In compiling all of this and going to edit it, I realized that it was way too long for just one video. So this first part is going to be kind of my discussion and explanation, looking at my own experience of figuring out my sexuality and gender. I'm not really going to go into like coming out to my parents or coming out in academia, although if you're interested in any of that, feel free to ask about it in the comments. I might do some sort of follow-up. I'm not planning on doing like a ton of content on this, but like I wanted to talk about it some. At the same time as this is coming out, I will also be publishing the second part, which is a Q&A from things that people ask me on Instagram, so you can go and watch that as well. So I'm gonna share with you my experience, because when I was heavily questioning, I didn't really have that many videos to go off of. And since then, I have found some things, not like a ton, but some. So I think that it would be a good idea to put my experiences out there, especially if other people can relate, because I know that it's super helpful, or can be super helpful to see people with similar experiences from you, and also learning from people that might be different. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am, in terms of sexuality and gender. Then I'm going to give you like a brief overview of my background, my history, my coming out journey, if you will. And then I'll talk about some specifics regarding sexuality and gender. It's a little bit hard to like break them up into definitively sexuality and then definitively gender, partly because my like figuring things out, like I figured part of my sexuality out, then gender, then sexuality again. So like timeline wise, it's a little bit weird to skip around, but we'll see what ends up happening. So my name is Beck. I'm 28 years old and I'm a non-binary lesbian. I also use the words gay, queer, and genderqueer to describe myself. I use they, them pronouns. For those who might not know what being a non-binary lesbian is, I'm not sure if this is the video to start, but a short definition or description from my personal perspective. The idea of being a woman or being a man, for me, just does not make sense. I am neither of those things. Femininity, masculinity, none of that represents who I am. So that's kind of non-binary, the way that I kind of experience it. So far as being a lesbian, I am not attracted to men. I'm only attracted to women and some non-binary people. I am comfortable with the word lesbian largely because socially, I share certain experiences with women, and I feel more akin to queer women. Like, I feel more attachment in general to queer people. Like I see things are complicated. Things are queer. I am queer which is by definition not going to fit very neatly into cis heteronormative boxes. I'm not a man, and I'm not attracted to men, so I'm a lesbian. That's the definition that you're going to get right now. So that's how I am right now, but I did not always identify that way. And I'd like to talk about my trajectory with the caveat that, you know, I went through different terms to describe myself. Just because they didn't work for me does not mean they're not going to work for somebody else. So do not weaponize my experience against other queer people. I came out the first time when I was around 21. That was around the time that I, like, let myself acknowledge that I was queer in any capacity. I first came out as panromantic demisexual, which, for me, other people might have slightly different definitions. For me, I thought that meant that gender did not impact the way that I was romantically attracted to people. That was panromantic. And demisexual meant that I was not sexually attracted to people unless I had a really strong bond with them. So the idea of, like, celebrity crushes was kind of confusing. My friends, like, pointing out random strangers and saying that they were hot just did not compute. I didn't think that anyone was hot or attractive in any way. That just didn't happen until I really knew them or had some kind of relationship with them. So that was at 21. I did some questioning after that, but it was usually where I stood in the asexual spectrum. I thought that I was maybe demi-ace flux, which is like demisexual, but like adding in like fluctuation. Like sometimes I was like more ace than others. And I also did a lot of questioning as to if I might be on the aromantic spectrum at some point. I seriously considered the terms qua-romantic and qua-sexual, which were basically where you, like, the line between, like, platonic and romantic, and the lines between romantic and sexual are just blurred, and, like, I couldn't definitively tell. Those were terms that I played with. Way before I questioned whether or not I was a lesbian, or whether or not I was, you know, attracted to men. Before I asked that question, I started asking gender questions. When I was about 23, almost 24, was when I first started letting myself actively question my gender and figure out where I was in terms of, like, being non-binary. It was not until I was 26, almost 27, that I finally acknowledged that I was gay and that I was not attracted to men. So, that's my trajectory. Now, I want to get into some things, because I think that, you know, for a lot of people who haven't experienced it, it's like, what on earth took you so long to figure that shit out? How do you not know that you're not attracted to somebody? And for people who are questioning, there's the question of, like, how do I know if I'm not attracted to somebody? And it took me a really long time to figure that out. Figuring out that I liked girls took long enough. But figuring out that I didn't like guys was a lot more complicated. A lot of that also boils down to certain mental health things and different ways that I perceived myself. I have kind of a history of dissociation, and even, like, not looking as intensely as, like, dissociation or, like, depersonalization. I have been a really huge people pleaser. I did not want to do things that would make people upset. And there's a lot that I could go into because, like, I grew up with lots of different sets of expectations because I have a really big family. I was a high school baby, so, like, I've got two sets of parents with very different parenting styles. Don't get me wrong, I love my family, but there was some level of distress sometimes, which everybody has. Different families. Families are stressful sometimes. That's fine. But with that, from a young age, I think I was very cognizant of other people's perceptions of me. One bit relating to sexuality that can kind of put you in my head a little bit. I have a very vivid memory from about 5th grade. I was 11. I was going to a new school. We switched schools halfway through the year. And I was on the bus. We were separated by grade level. There was this girl that was in my grade, and she had like headphones in, or I guess headphones on. We didn't really have earbuds that were that popular at that point. But she was sitting and like listening to music, and I was thinking like, wow, she looks like she's really cool. Like, I wonder if I should go talk to her. I mean, she's really cute. And it was at that comment that my brain said, no, you're not allowed to think that, you're straight. And I basically shut down. There was a very particular emotion and like visceral like feeling that I had that I think was shame and guilt. And just, I shut down and disconnected from feelings as well as I could. And that kind of feeling and that disconnection happened a lot in regards to like situations where I could have felt like that. Sometimes it wasn't that intense, but sometimes it was. So that's kind of what I contended with, and that's why it took me as long as it did to figure out why I was attracted to girls, or that I was attracted to girls. Figuring out attraction to guys is more complicated, partly because growing up, the way that I categorized things, if they were large feelings that I had towards a guy, they were crushes. If they were large feelings that I had towards a girl, I really wanted to be friends with them. Did not take into consideration which of those feelings was more intense. And with guys, a lot of the times, it was not like I saw them and thought, ooh, I have a crush on him. It was often, when I was younger, I would try to figure out who I had a crush on. And often it was, you know, if I was friends with a guy, it would be that guy. If there was a guy that I interacted with a lot, even if he was a little shit to me, that was the person that I picked to have a crush on. And I would, like, find why he was attractive. And then from that point, I would try to hyperfixate on whatever aspects of that person that I could find physically appealing. A lot of the times it was people's eyes. Sometimes it was their hair. And I would try to romanticize the fuck out of it, despite the fact that I had stronger feelings, certainly, for other girls at the time, but I tried my hardest not to think about it. So that was the framework that I went in with. And it's not a framework that I was able to deconstruct until well into adulthood. It was not until I had an experience dating a guy, dating a girl, and then dating a guy again until I got the fucking picture. So I was desperately slow, and a lot of that had to do with breaking down that framework. I certainly, without dating the people, I could have figured it out in theory, because, like, for one thing, looking at just people who, they're not like full-blown crushes, but like somebody walking into a room and you notice them, like getting nervous and like my face turning red and like being afraid to look them in the face. I'm usually bad at eye contact, but there's a difference between run-of-the-mill eye contact shit and, oh my god, they're looking at me, oh my god, they're talking to me, oh my god, what am I doing? What should I do with my face? How do I speak? Very different emotions. That has never happened with a guy who's a stranger at all. It's really hardly happened with any of the guys that I've attempted to, like, date or force myself to have crushes on. Like, I say visceral, I don't even know if I'm using that right, but, like, the physical reaction, like, that just doesn't happen. When I look at, like, celebrity crushes, again, I would do the thing where I, like, tried to, like, see who was hottest. The absolutely funniest time in hindsight was when I tried to convince myself I had a crush on Orlando Bloom. Literally so that I could talk to another girl who liked to talk about her celebrity crushes. I tried to also jump on the hype train when people were talking about, you know, uh, David Tennant, Benedict Cumberbatch. It was Tumblr 2012. I was trying to get in with it. I highly appreciated David Tennant's hair. But Karen Gillan is objectively hotter, even if I didn't like Amy. The only guy that I think I genuinely had a celebrity crush on was probably Darren Criss. Even then, it's that space between, like, do I want to be you or do I want you? I don't know, but I think it's okay that I don't know. But that's literally it, and literally him specifically as Blaine Anderson. We're not going to talk about Glee, though. We're already talking about a completely different gay train wreck. So I think those things were important for me to really unpack in order to figure out that I was gay. Really breaking down that framework and asking myself, like, is this how I feel? Or am I interpreting my emotions? Because for me, I have a really hard time, especially when things get bad, at trying to logic my emotions. And if they don't fit my logic, they get shoved down. Any Enneagram people, I'm an Enneagram 9, and that's me going to 6. And nobody wants that. I certainly don't want that. Kind of the last piece with sexuality that I wanted to talk about too. So there's those frameworks that you're working with, where, feelings about guys are a certain way, feelings about girls are a certain way. With thinking that my whole life, I had confused what attraction really was. Especially since I'd only before the one person who wasn't a guy that I dated, I'd only ever dated guys. And like I said, I hyper-focused on certain aspects of them that I found enjoyable or aesthetically pleasing. And especially, and this was something that I figured out, in adulthood too, the combination of, searching for something that was pleasant, actually having a good bond with them. You can have close emotional bonds with people that aren't romantic. So having that, plus little details I could latch on to, and knowing that they liked me. Because if somebody likes me, first of all, it's a set of expectations. And I'm a people pleaser. And if I like the person in a different capacity, then, of course I want to be there for them in whatever way they need me to be there for them in. So I'm going to try to take on that role. And that's what happened. And then on top of all that, being wanted feels really nice. And some people talk about being gay or being not attracted to certain people in terms of what is, repulsive. And there was a lot that I was not repulsed by. And most of the stuff that I was repulsed by, I was able to deal with. So I construed that into, I just put that in the framework somehow because I thought these other things meant that I was attracted to guys. So, since I was not repulsed by guys and enjoyed being wanted and also enjoyed, certain things, I wasn't repulsed, and sometimes it was really, really nice, which is different than actually genuinely being attracted. And I did not understand that that wasn't attraction until I was in a relationship, relationship with someone who is not a guy, and, holy shit, I was in a relationship with someone for almost a decade, with a guy for almost a decade. I thought that people really liked to over-exaggerate. I thought that's what love songs were. I thought that people were just really into it and like romanticizing the hell out of it. I was like, okay, I can get with that. I thought that like the plot lines where you go to the airport to like stop them from leaving, I was like, that person needs to find some children. But the first time I kissed a girl, I saw the fireworks. Like, I finally got it, and damn. So, and it was a little bit like, if I knew different things, and if I blah blah blah, I could have figured it out then, but I didn't. Mental health stuff also, like, got in the way of, like, literally everything. I had undiagnosed, untreated PTSD. And on top of that, I was also comparing this experience with the experience of someone who I'd been with for a super long time, with whom I should have broken up with 4 years previous. So there's the question of, like, is it sexuality, or is it just, like, we clung on way too long and that was just a bad situation? The answer is both. But I didn't know that at the time, so it took me attempting to date a guy again and waiting for that spark and assuming that it was coming and continuing with the relationship anyways because it's what made logical sense. It wasn't until like over 2 years into that I figured it out. This video feels a lot like me just describing to the general public what kind of dumbass I am. And if you're a dumbass too, that's okay. Solidarity. I think a lot of this stuff I could also apply to gender to a certain degree because heteronormativity and cisnormativity are so tied together. Like, fitting people's ideas of the perfect, like, you know, whoever they expected me to be, was very much looking straight. It wasn't until I was well into being 25 that I stopped dressing straight or trying to look as straight as possible going to my dad's house. So gender expression was really tied to heteronormativity as well. And so on top of like erasure, I did not hear about a trans person in high school. I graduated in 2011. There was nothing. I had a vague idea of what a trans woman was based on like shitty Hollywood stereotypes, but that's about it. I didn't learn about non-binary people, trans people until I was on Tumblr in like 2012. And I needed that information in order to start questioning shit, even though I didn't start questioning until a lot later. I had the framework in mind. I like dove into the LGBT community. I said I came out at 21-ish, and at that point I dove head first into my LGBT organization at my college. I was in every officer position except for secretary, funnily enough, because that's the position that I probably would have opted for if I'd really had much of a choice in the matter. And it wasn't until, let's see, I joined in probably late 2014. It wasn't until maybe the middle of 2016 that I started questioning my gender because I hadn't thought about it. I had started thinking about certain things around it before, particularly clothing. When I was like 19 or 20, I was having panic attacks trying to get dressed. I had clothes that I liked, that I thought were cute. I worked at a clothes store and I would like get stuff that I thought was cute. And I thought I was trying to find my own aesthetic, or at least an aesthetic that was different from the one that was expected of me. And I just couldn't. When I would put on the clothes, it looked wrong. And I couldn't identify what that was. I thought that it was maybe like body image related. Like I tried to lose weight and developed some unhealthy habits. And ultimately that's not what it was. And none of that would fix it. I spent a while an extended while doing, focusing mostly on closet cosplay. And I would make outfits to go along with characters, and that helped a lot. Because I wasn't thinking, like, does this look good on me? I was thinking, oh, is this a Blaine Anderson outfit? This is my John sweater, John from Sherlock. So I had to put myself in that different headspace. But it wasn't until, like I said, 2016 that I started questioning. And that is because the guy that I was dating at the time, that I had dated since I was 14. And yes, that absolutely complicated figuring literally everything out. I was trying to explain certain things to him. As supportive and well-meaning as he was cishet. And he was really having trouble wrapping his head around gender, particularly because he was not very gender conforming. So I was trying to explain to him what it felt like for me, like the difference between wanting to dress a certain way and like my gender identity. And as I was really sitting with myself and feeling where I felt all the things, I was explaining to him what it all was, and I was thinking in my mind, if this is really what gender is, like, you're not a woman. Like, this is not it. Attempted to shove that shit down. But once the egg is cracked, it does not go back in the shell and seal up. So about 6 months after that, I started actively talking about it more with the person that I was with. I had broken up with the guy and started dating a non-binary trans feminine person. And I was able to talk with her about a lot of the gendery stuff. And I cut all my hair off. Not literally, but I cut it really short and kind of started experimenting with that. And kind of went from there. I'm not gonna go into more detail about, my aesthetic, because it's constantly like evolving and figuring out, partly because like what I'm comfortable with also changes. That's kind of a part of like the queerness, like kind of being okay with that. Even cishet people, like their style doesn't stay the same, what they're comfortable wearing doesn't stay the same. So as a non-binary person, mine doesn't either. So we've covered kind of my experience, a couple of key things regarding sexuality and gender, all without oversharing details of my relationships. Love to see that.